Hi, it's Shonna, and welcome to Stories with Me. Tonight we're doing Chapter 8 of The Barren Grounds by David Robertson. I am so glad you're here. This book is getting so good. If you remember, in Chapter 7, Eli and Morgan went upstairs to the attic, and Eli was doing a drawing, and the drawing started to come alive. Snow started entering into the room, and this creature right here, called an ochik, or the English word is fisher, walking on two legs, wearing clothing, started walking towards them like it could see them. That's where we left off, a really exciting part. So I want you to do what I do and get ready, get comfortable so that you can relax. You can even maybe close your eyes while I'm reading the story to you. And when your eyes are closed and your body's calm, you can start picturing some of the things that the author's trying to tell you. Maybe when you're imagining this story, you can think about, what do you think Eli looks like to you? What's Eli wearing? What about Morgan? Does Morgan have long hair or short hair? What's she wearing? What does the room look like? Those kinds of things. And that kind of imagining the pictures in your mind happens best when you're feeling relaxed. So I want you to just close your eyes with me for a minute. I want you to check in with your body. Start at your head and go all the way down to your feet. Is everything comfortable? Maybe your pants are too tight. If they are, go get some pajamas on. Or maybe you're thinking about, my stomach is hungry. Then you can go get a snack. Maybe you're cold. Then you get a sweater or a blanket. But do what you need to do so that you can really relax and you can imagine with your mind's eye the pictures that the author's making with the words that I'm reading to you. Go ahead and pause this tape. You can pause it as many times as you need to. And you don't have to finish it all today. You can come back tomorrow and you can listen to this again and again if you feel like you've missed anything. Are you ready now? I've got a cup of tea with me. It's chamomile. That's a tea that's made from a flower, and it actually makes you really calm and kind of sleepy, and I'm going to bed after I read this chapter to you, so this tea is perfect for me. Okay, let's get started. Chapter 8, The Barren Grounds. Let me open up the book here. Oops. Here we go. Did he see us? Morgan took the drawing from Eli and inspected it. The fisher was definitely closer. And this is the fisher right here. It's an animal. Check it out on Google. It's kind of like a fierce hunting weasel kind of animal. The fisher was definitely closer, and more than that, one arm was extended out, reaching for them. Oh my God, he did see us! She kept expecting snow and wind to erupt from the page at any moment. Her hands were shaking from the cold, from the shock of it all, from the thought of some animal sprinting at them. She handed the drawing back to Eli, too freaked out to hold it any longer. It was like a scene from a horror movie. But Eli's hands weren't shaking at all. "Aren't you scared?" she asked. He was looking at the drawing and not at Morgan. He ran his fingers across the surface of it. "It's still cold." "Eli!" Morgan snapped her fingers to get his attention. "Huh?" "I asked if you were scared," she said. "Why aren't you scared? This is a little bit crazy, no?" "It reminds me of home," he said. "Your home is like Hoth?" "Hoth? Are you serious?" she said. "The Rebel Alliance's secret base. Star Wars, ring a bell?" Eli shook his head. "Well, if that," she pointed at the drawing from a safe distance, "reminds you of home, trust me, your home is like Hoth." Hoth is an ice planet, if you haven't watched Star Wars, in the Star Wars series. She picked up her phone and used it to guide them out of the secret room. And that thing is the abominable snowman creature that captured Luke. She's talking about Star Wars again. That's not a thing, Eli said. It's a fissure. In Cree, the word for fissure is ochik. Morgan turned on her heels so fast that her hair whipped her cheeks. Yeah? And what's the word for, did you not just see a portal open to another world and that ochik running at us like it wanted to kill us? Her feet were wet from the floor. She took off her socks and wrung them out. There's no word for that in Cree, Eli said. Duh, said Morgan. It's called sarcasm. Do you know what sarcasm is? You probably do, but if you're not sure, sarcasm means somebody says something but they mean the opposite. Let me give you an example. So if I say, oh yeah, that tastes really good, I'm saying it tastes good, but you look at my face, ugh, I don't mean that it tastes good. I mean the opposite. I mean it tastes bad. Sarcasm can be confusing. It can be hard to know if someone's telling the truth or they're being sarcastic. She took one step down the first flight of stairs, but he put a hand on her shoulder and she stopped. What? She said. Aren't you curious? I'm a little too freaked out to be curious, Eli, she said. We just saw a picture come to life and it's freaking me out that you're not freaked out. She kept walking down the stairs. But wouldn't you want to go through the picture if you could, he asked. Would you go through a magic portal picture if you could? Would you? I'm not sure if I would. I'd be a little bit worried that ochik is not safe. I don't know. This time she stopped on her own. You mean if there wasn't a humanoid animal running at us, would I want to go through a picture into another world? Well, doesn't that happen in your books, he asked. Yes, she stated plainly, that happens in my fiction books. Fiction means it's not true, it's made up. She leaned in close to him to drive home her point. Did you consider that he might have been mad? I mean, we were like humans trying to come onto his land. Kind of like in real life, too, eh? He said. Whatever. Morgan ran up the stairs and snatched the picture from his hands. We should burn it. Make sure that thing doesn't, I don't know, crawl out and kill us in our sleep. Eli, in turn, grabbed it from her. We aren't burning it. He gripped the picture with both hands in case she tried to take it again. He wouldn't look away from it, and when she shone her flashlight on him, she could see he didn't look curious anymore, but sad. It reminded him of home, and he wasn't anywhere near home. He was here, in this attic, in this house, in the middle of some upper middle class neighborhood, in this city. It wasn't long ago that he'd been in his own community. She sat down on the top steps. Have you ever been away from your community, where you know, and you had that feeling of feeling lonely for the place that you are from? I feel badly that Eli has that feeling of being far, far away from his community and where he feels like he belongs. I don't remember my home, she said. I wouldn't even call it a home. She wrapped her arms around her body. Now that the shock of what they'd seen and heard had begun to wear off, she noticed that her shirt was wet, and she felt cold. It's not the blizzard that's like home, Eli said, or the ochik. He sat down beside her. She looked at him, and he smiled. She smiled back. It's the open space, all the room. There was this field behind my house that was like forever long, and I could just play in it all day. Even when I was lost, I wasn't lost. Morgan put her arm around Eli. She didn't try to take the picture again. She even looked at it, tried to see what he saw, remember what he remembered. Okay, we won't burn it, she said, but we can leave it up here in the room. Nothing will happen to it. Promise? He asked. You won't come back up here and throw it out later? Promise, she assured him. And if the fisher tries to crawl out of the picture, can I remind you how crazy this all sounds? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. It won't, he said. How do you know? Because we did something. I don't think the portal will open unless we do the same things again. Like staple gun it to the wall? Maybe. Morgan put her hand on her face and shook her head. We must be sleeping. She pinched her thigh and then her arm several times. Her skin was as numb as it was cold, but she could still feel the pinches. She didn't wake up in bed, her ear pressed against the pillow so she could hear her heartbeat. She remained on the steps, sitting beside Eli, both of them staring at a picture that had just come alive. We just opened a portal to another world, she said. We should go there. We should go. What? Are you crazy? Morgan did snatch away the drawing this time, but not to burn it. She walked back down into the attic, tossed the picture into the secret room, and then slammed the door. Maybe the Ochek needed us, Eli pleaded. Maybe it wasn't running after us to kill us. It was stuck in the blizzard, right? It wasn't stuck in the blizzard. There was a village behind it. Remember, you drew the picture. But what if we're supposed to go to the other side, he asked. You said it yourself. It's a portal to another world. Why would it open now with us right here? We can't just ignore that. Oh, yes, we can, she said. We'll seal this place back up and pretend like we never found it. I like my fantasy worlds in books. I don't want to pretend we never found it. You just want to pretend it's your home because you don't have one anymore. Oof. What do you think about what she just said? How do you think that made Eli feel? I think it made him feel terrible too. And I wonder what made her suddenly get mean there. Why do you think she got mean there? Well, maybe she'll explain. The attic fell deathly silent. Through the door to their secret room, Morgan could hear drops of water land on the plywood from the sloped ceiling, with snow left over from the blizzard melting. Eli, she whispered, I'm so sorry. Of all the things that she'd done today, this was by far the worst. I was just scared. Sometimes people can say mean things or act angry when they actually are afraid, and that's what happened to her. It's not that it's okay. I'm glad she said she was sorry. That was pretty hurtful. Instead of answering, instead of looking at Morgan, Eli just got up and left with his head down. She heard his steps on the stairs on the second floor. Morgan waited a moment longer and then followed behind him. And by the time she walked into the hallway, he'd already shut the door to his bedroom. Morgan went to her room. She shut the door, took off her damp clothing, put on a pair of sweats and a ratty old t-shirt, and collapsed onto her bed. That's a great example of the word pictures I was talking about. Close your eyes. Let me read that one to you again, and I want you to imagine in your head, what does it look like? She went in her room. What does her room look like in your mind? Colors her bed? Is there a window in it? She took off her damp clothing, put on a pair of sweatpants. What color are the sweatpants, do you think? And a ratty old t-shirt. I wondered, what does her ratty old t-shirt look like? And she collapsed onto her bed. Does she have stuffed animals on her bed? Is it neat and tidy, or do you think it's messy? She laid on her stomach with her face pushed hard into the pillow, crying until it was as damp as the clothing that she'd taken off. Morgan? It was Katie. Remember, Katie's the foster mom. How much time had passed? Minutes? An hour? Morgan hadn't been thinking about the porter or about the fisher, just about Eli and what she'd said to him. How could she have said that? Like she'd never gone through what he was going through right now. She was scared, like she told him. Scared. And the more she thought of it, jealous. Why would she be jealous? I wonder what she's jealous about. She was jealous that she remembered his home and she didn't. She'd never thought that she'd wanted to before meeting him. Morgan didn't say anything, but she felt Katie sit down on the foot of her bed. She looked up and saw that Katie was holding the shoebox, and the first thing Katie did was put it on the ground and slide it across the carpet until it was flush with the wall. Have the moccasins been repurposed as a peace offering? Morgan asked, staring out the window at the streetlight. Because if we're being all indigenous, I think I'd learned something about smoking a pipe for that. And it got so quiet. So quiet, Morgan thought she could hear Eli's pencil scraping against the paper. I don't know why I say things like that, Morgan whispered. Katie shifted her body to face Morgan, and Morgan could see the movement out of the corner of her eye. I googled Manitoba mucklucks. There are people who try to profit from indigenous culture, like gift shops in small towns that sell dream catchers or something. You hang them on your rear view mirror, stuff like that. Those people have bad intentions. And Morgan turned towards Katie slightly, and Katie went on. But Manitoba Mucklucks, that's a company owned and operated by indigenous people. But that doesn't mean you have to wear them, Morgan. Katie leaned forward and rubbed her palms against her knees. Were her palms sweating? Was Katie nervous talking about this? Maybe. I don't think I'm saving you by fostering you. You're a strong young woman. You don't need saving. James and I, we want to make sure that you're not, and she rubbed her face. Well, I'm just one of those good-intentioned settlers, okay? And Morgan turned onto her back and propped herself up on a pillow. At the school where I teach, there isn't a lot of diversity. The neighborhood's a lot like this one, so, well, you get what I'm saying. Anyway, in my grade 5 class, there was this one girl, a beautiful girl. She's indigenous. She looked sad all the time and scared. And one day, halfway through the year, I guess after she started to trust me, she told me what she'd gone through. She was in care. Katie shook her head and wiped out her cheek at a tear that had fallen. Care. What'd she say? Morgan asked. Katie shook her head again, like Morgan shouldn't know, or Katie shouldn't say. I thought if I could just show a kid love, then I could give a kid a good home. Then maybe somehow you'd be helping that girl? Maybe, she nodded. Or I could just be helping you. Morgan looked Katie over in the quiet that followed. She couldn't have been older than 30. Her light brown hair was tied back into a loose ponytail that had been tighter at dinner. She was wearing gray yoga pants and a thin black cardigan that she was hugging around her body, and her glasses were sliding toward the tip of her nose. Those moccasins, Katie said, and the bannock. She chuckled softly, a gentle self-admonishment. And a self-admonishment is kind of like you're making fun of yourself in a gentle way. Morgan imagined, I thought I should try to connect you with your culture and that maybe it would make things better for you. Morgan sat up, leaned forward on her elbows. Those moccasins would have been perfect for Eli, He's got himself figured out. He's indigenous. He probably goes to ceremonies and all that. I don't think I even want to be indigenous. I grew up white in all those white homes. I'm not indigenous anymore. Katie spoke carefully and quietly. Does doing all of that make him more indigenous than you? Morgan shrugged. She didn't know. She didn't know what to say. What do you think? Do you think that you need to do ceremonies, wear moccasins, and do things in indigenous way to be indigenous? Or is being indigenous something that you're born into? It's just part of who you are. What do you think? That's a big question, isn't it? Morgan's thinking about a lot of really important things right now. Tell me what I can do, Katie said. That's part of how I can learn. If you can just treat me like I'm any other human girl. That's it. I don't need, to wear those. And she pointed at the gift Katie and James had gotten her. Or hang dream catchers from my window, or smudge every morning, or whatever else. Just treat me like a human. Katie shuffled up the bed closer to Morgan. Closer, but not too close. She put her hand on Morgan's foot. I like you, Morgan. James and I both do, and we don't want to lose you. Even if I act crazy? Morgan asked, trying to keep the tears down in her stomach. She'd cried enough today. Katie smiled reassuringly. Nothing you can do can make us want you gone, Morgan. And speaking of humans, of being a girl, girls, teens, they can do that sometimes. I was a girl once, believe it or not, and I did way worse than slam my palm on a table or make an adult's breakfast into a mad face. It was just the whole day. Morgan thought of every little thing she'd done, and she wished she hadn't. Katie didn't say anything. She sat there for a moment, tapped Morgan on the foot a couple of times, and then got up from the bed. I won't run away, Morgan blurted out before Katie had left the bedroom and closed the door. Then I'll see you in the morning. Katie turned back one last time. And no faces on your breakfast plate, moccasins or bannock. Actually, I kind of like bannock, Morgan said, with lots of butter and jam sometimes. Have you ever had bannock? I just had it recently, and it was with butter and jam, and it's delicious, especially when it's fresh and hot. I highly recommend trying it. Morgan turned onto her side, stared out the window, and stayed like that until the house was dark and quiet. No movement, no snoring. She wanted to go see Eli and apologize to him. Tell him, okay, if the portal works again, if it wasn't some crazy mind meld hallucination they had had simultaneously, they could check it out. Go through it. Just a few steps, and only if that Fisher thing wasn't there. If it was running at them again, no deal. But it had been a long day, and in thinking about all of this, she fell asleep. Ooh, that was a big chapter. Morgan is really thinking about what does it mean to be indigenous, and how is it different for her and for Eli, and where do her foster parents fit in all this, and what does she do with this magical portal? It's exciting. I am so happy to be reading this book with you, and I hope that you enjoyed this chapter with me as much as I have with you. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you again next week when we read chapter 9 of the Barren Grounds. Have a good night. See you next week. Bye-bye.